Good evening and welcome to the Nevada PTA Town Hall. We are happy to have everybody joining us if you're watching live on Facebook right now, or if you're catching it on the replay on YouTube later. My name is Becky Garcia and I am the president of the Nevada Parent Teacher Association. And this year obviously has been a back to school season unlike any we've ever seen before. As educators and teachers and as family and students, it's a whole new experience across our state and what back to school looks like. Last week we had a town hall regarding digital and distance learning. And tonight we're going to focus on kind of the diverse and special needs that different student populations have. Different districts are going back to school in different ways. Some have in-person, some have hybrid, some have distance. There's so many different things about what back to school looks like this year, and we wanted to cover how that impacts some of our special needs students, our gifted students, and even like what senior year is going to look like potentially, because we all know that that was a challenge last year or last school year for many. And so tonight, we have joining us first, Catherine Lowden. She coordinates the Washoe County School District's School Counseling and Social Work Department. Catherine has over 25 years experience in school counseling and has supervised school counseling in Washoe since 2010. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us tonight. We also have Lisa Smith. She is a special education teacher with 17 years of experience in Nevada and California. She's a national board candidate and a mother of a 2020 CCSD graduating senior. She already went through that this year. And also Becky Barone. She has been an educator in the Clark County School District for more than 20 years, having taught K-5. She's currently a learning strategist and has been a Gait specialist as well. She is a published author, including in the Reading Teacher and Gifted Child Quarterly, and also wrote a book regarding literature conversations in the classroom. And full disclosure, you taught my kids in Gifted and Talented, and that's how she got roped into joining us tonight, because we've had many of these conversations offline. So thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight and sharing your experience and helping others kind of navigate this kind of back to school time period. And that's what I wanted to start off with. Catherine, I wanted to start with you. Obviously, back to school this year is different than any other year that most of us have seen. I've been a back to school parent for 15 years now. You guys have been educators for almost 20 or more years. I don't think any of us have seen a year like this. So as we look at going back to school and the emotional differences this year, what do you think parents and families can focus on, and teachers, of helping their kids make that transition, whether it's hybrid or in-person or distance? What are some of the priorities for social emotional learning as we go back to school this year?
So most importantly, you've already identified that this is difficult for a lot of people. Even in the best of circumstances, every one of us has experienced some anxiety and angst about what's been occurring with the pandemic, with some of the issues around race and students of color, several other things that we've had uncertainty about in the economics. So what's most important really is just meeting your child where your child is, listening to your child, seeing where your child, how your child is feeling. Not all children are the same, and over this whole situation, they've had a range of emotions. So identifying and validating what they're thinking and feeling, and then preparing them for whatever choice you as a parent have made. And maybe your district made the choice for you. Maybe you have a series of different choices that you can engage in for your child. But regardless of what that is, really exploring, explaining the expectations, helping them see where they can be a part of it. Because that long-term relationship that you have with your child is what's going to last through this and through many other hard and difficult challenges. You can point to things that they have overcome in the past, that resiliency, point to the strength of you as a family and as a team and as a parent. Those things matter in helping them feel safe and like they have people that they can go to, that they know and trust, who will help them get through this no matter what age they are.
I think that's great advice. And Lisa and Becky, as educators, how are you approaching kind of that back to school connecting and figuring out how to help kids in the or other teachers navigate this process? I'll go to Becky first and then Lisa. That way you don't have to guess who goes first.
Well, in the position I'm in now, we've been creating lesson plans for the first 6 weeks of school for K through 8 educators. And within the lesson plans, we've made accommodations for our gifted population, for our EL population. We've made, we did SEL, social emotional learning strands and standards and how we're going to meet those needs. And it was a collaborative process between the department I'm in the K-12 literacy department. And we had, after the general ed teachers wrote the plans, then the special education team would come in and modify those plans with accommodations. Then the EL department came in. So I think looking at that for students, I thought it was a great process anyway of how to lesson plan as a collaborative team, but it's looking at meeting the needs of all students within one virtual lesson plan that's happening so that the kids aren't getting lost and their needs are being met within one lesson that's happening. I think also developing those relationships, again, like Catherine said, that's probably the most important thing to do at the beginning of the year is establish those routines and procedures and getting to know the kids in a different way than we ever have as educators online and seeing their little faces just, you know, staring back at us and how to keep them engaged. When you have 30 kids in a 5th grade class, how are you going to keep them engaged so they're not bored and doing other things within that lesson that you're giving them?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. I respect the teachers are having to figure out a whole new world, even for schools that are going back to school in person. There's so many differences to the structure and the setup that guiding kids through that process is a whole, you know, challenge in itself. Lisa, how are you looking at this from supporting kids in special education and helping them with that social emotional transition? Oh, you're still on mute. Somebody has to do it every time, every Facebook Live, somebody has to do it.
I apologize. Definitely having a good rapport with the students, like it's a normal school year, is important to relationships. I recommend for parents to have an open and honest conversation with their student, you know, making sure to encourage them to work hard, follow instructions, you know, the basics. Encourage them to have a love for learning, asking questions, encouraging them to ask questions, teaching them to advocate for themselves. If a student needs something, have them communicate to the teacher instead of having the parent always do it. These are lifelong skills they'll need to be in their repertoire as an adult. I recommend going back to the school year as it's a normal school year as much as possible. Not to upset the apple cart, not to overwhelm a student. Sometimes it's important to understand that students will take on our attitude, whether it's negative or positive, and to be mindful of what we say around our students, our children. You know, just basically keep checking in with them, making sure they're not overwhelmed.
So we've heard a lot from special education families that are concerned about how students, especially those who are either doing hybrid or distance only, which is what's happening in Clark County, is going to be distance only across the board. So that's almost 70% of students in Nevada that are going to be distance only. So Lisa, how are special education teachers preparing to make changes to meet those special education student needs?
Well, definitely, I know I can't speak for all special ed teachers, but I'm at a new school, Divich Elementary School, and there's a phenomenal staff there who it's full of educators that think outside of the box. Some of the things that we're doing is we're collaborating with grade level teams, the administrators, and soon the parents. We're also going to provide direct instruction in whole group settings, small group settings, depending on the student's needs. We'll have virtual office hours to provide that extra support for students and families. We're planning engaging lessons, hopefully, based on the students' individual goals and benchmarks, as well as keeping the students' preferences and learning needs in mind. We're also considering the family makeup. Are there multiple learners in the house? How many devices do they have? Do they have internet connectivity capability? Taking into consideration all of that. We're recording lessons for students who aren't able to attend the live sessions. Maybe they're going to be at a daycare who, maybe will not support their live session learning. We're doing wellness checks. We're going to reach out to our parents to have conversations with them to find out their needs. And also not just at the beginning of the school year, that should be ongoing. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. I myself always take it into consideration, the family and what their needs are. I always have good rapport with my parents. They can call me, text me, send any kind of signal, and I'll be there, because even more now, I feel like we're going into this realm that is very new to a lot of us. I have never taught virtually myself in my 17 years, and I'm learning a lot, and my head is full of stuff right now. So just have patience with us, and we will try our best. Our goal is the same for all of our students. We want them to be successful.
Yeah. So Catherine and maybe Lisa, you both probably have answers for this. As families are trying to navigate the IEP or 504 process with the way school is changing. So whether it is that they're in Washoe and they're going to be doing a hybrid, or maybe they've chosen the online version, because Washoe has a lot of different choices. What would you recommend to families in trying to figure out how to ensure those IEPs and 504s help meet their students' needs, and how to communicate with the schools to ensure that that process works well? Because I think a lot of families have anxiety about how this is going to, when you change how school looks, how is this going to impact my students? So I don't know if Catherine, you want to start, and then Lisa, maybe you can chime in.
Yes. So actually in Washoe County School District, I also supervise 504, the Office of Civil Rights 504, and counselors work a lot with 504s. They often case manage those. And then we collaborate with the case managers who serve students who have an individual education plan. So what I would recommend is to first of all make contact with your child's teacher or counselor. Look over the goals. As a parent, you have a right to what those goals are, what those accommodations are in a 504. Look over what those are. There are some things that are met in the home environment or taken care of. Like, for example, in a 504 in the home environment, there are some things that you may need to, as a team, discuss and work on. Also related to related services. If you're on distance learning, exploring with your district how to make sure that those related services, whether they're counseling or speech and language services or something else, are also met. Really just knowing that you have a right to put input into how that looks and what happens with it, and that this is a partnership between you and the school district related to servicing and supporting your child. So it does look different. There are a lot of ideas. People are talking about them and studying best ways to do that. A lot of our students who have an individual education plan are engaging in in-person learning or hybrid learning 5 days a week, or in another schedule, depending on what's happening with that. So we're just working with a range of things and really emphasizing that partnership with the parents and the teachers on the plan.
It definitely is a partnership, Catherine. I would have to agree. I know for CCSD, special education teachers are going to be required to make some revisions to the IEPs to update them to include virtual or distance learning. By law, we're required to continue the service minutes that are in there, the especially designed instruction, until that IEP is revised. So we'll need some patience and cooperation from parents. And it is so important for the parent to be an active participant. You know your child more than anybody on this earth. And if anybody should advocate for your child, it's you. And if you need to contact me to ask me about any kind of rights you have, please do that. I'm an advocate for you and your student, and we will need your cooperation and patience and involvement to complete the IEP revision process and also throughout the distance learning adventure.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it as an adventure, because I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how it's all going to work and what it's going to look like. And you know, that leads to a question about gifted and talented. Obviously, the Nevada State Legislature actually made some cuts to gifted and talented, and then mixed with that, we also now have school looking very different. Because again, it could be hybrid, it could be in person, it could be virtual. And so there's a lot of parents wondering if gifted programs are still going to be happening. And I know we aren't able to speak for all 17 districts, but maybe Becky or Catherine can talk more about how, even in a virtual world, what types of gifted programs or services are going to be available. Are those programs still going to be offered even in a different environment?
In CCSD, they are. Students are going to be have the opportunity to be pulled out within a school schedule. So the elementary schools are scheduling their specials and their reading time, their ELA time, and their math time, and there will be time for the students to be pulled out into a virtual classroom with their Gait teacher. Within within the state. In a regular classroom, there were only supposed to be 20 to 1. So I'm not sure how that's going to look, if they'll be able to have more children within the virtual setting, or if it's.
Yeah, we lost your volume. I'm not sure what happened. You're not on mute, but I couldn't hear you suddenly. I'm not sure if that's me. But Catherine, are Gait services continuing, or gifted and talented services continuing in Washoe?
So yes, so our chief academic officer and others in our district have made gifted education a priority. We are working to make sure that the teachers and others are able to access students and then continuing things. So for example, I have counselors who are dedicated, gifted and talented counselors. And I could speak to what they're doing, you know, collaborating with the teachers, and they're continuing programming and services for our gifted students, and recognizing the importance of really, you know, keeping them engaged and keeping them continuing on the path that they were prior. And they're also looking at some of the social and emotional unique things around gifted students, and giving them some ideas, like ways that they can be proactive and have agency related to issues that are going on, and ways to involve them in doing things that can benefit others related to the pandemic and the situation. So they've just had a lot of ideas, you know, connecting to colleges and universities, working with them on that. And I hear a lot from the gifted and talented teachers as well about some of that. There are challenges, and it is different. And with students that are gifted and talented, and our students with a 504, and our students that have an individual education plan, it always seems like we do need to do something more and something different. And so we need to all be continuing to remember that they need those specialized services to reach their full potential.
And that was actually one of my next questions, was related to gifted students. Actually in the legislature, we heard some misconceptions about what, this idea that gifted kids are just the straight A kids who are going to do fine regardless. And there you go. But could maybe Becky and Catherine, if you want to add, feel free, but could you share a little bit more about really the difference with gifted students and why those additional supports are needed and why they fall under that kind of big umbrella of special education, and maybe how that's different from, I already shared, Becky, you were my kid's gifted and talented teacher. And years ago, you shared a thing that was a chart about a difference between bright and gifted. And ever since then, I was like, oh, that was like the light bulb. And so maybe could you share kind of some of that for those who are watching and aren't as familiar, but see some of this in their kids, but aren't understanding maybe why they need help navigating the system.
So with gifted students, there is a misconception that they are the straight A students. And yes, there are gifted students who are straight A students, but there are also gifted students who are not organized, don't get their work done, don't turn things in, which I have one of each in my family. And those gifted kids are often overlooked by classroom teachers, not because the classroom teachers don't think they're gifted. They just don't, a lot of them don't have the knowledge that it isn't just the straight A students. Gifted kids have personalities that are not always, they're outside the box thinkers, and a lot of times they're outside the box, they act outside of the box too. The one thing they do have in common, I will say 99% of gifted kids want to learn, but a lot of them don't care about the grades that they get. They have curiosity and they want to learn, which I found during the spring in a virtual classroom. I did a flipped classroom where they would learn the content and then come back to me and we would discuss, and they would go off on their own and find so much more information. So I actually think for gifted kids, a virtual classroom can be a place for them to really blossom and grow, because they do have that curiosity to learn and find more and more. And when you have 50-minute blocks with them or 75-minute blocks during the week, and the time goes so fast, they don't have that time. So I think that it could be a very good platform for a lot of our gifted students. And also, within a gifted classroom, if you go in, you're not going to see the kids sitting and having a lecture. The kids are on the floor, they're all over the place, because a lot of them, that's the way they learn, which is great to have those smaller classrooms when we are back in a traditional school, having 10 to 15 kids, so they can have that attention. Because a lot of times the gifted kids also are told, we're focusing so much on Tier 1 instruction and intervention, and our gifted students get lost in the mix. And which is why I wanted to become a Gait teacher, to give those students their individual, they are on the special ed continuum, to give them their individualized instruction and attention, because they do, a lot of times the kids will act out or they won't do anything because they already know what you're teaching them. And so having a Gait classroom virtually or in person gives them those opportunities to explore and grow at their own pace.
Yeah. Catherine, did you want to add anything?
No, I just agree with what she said. I think a lot of times, we always come to a dangerous place when we make assumptions about kids instead of meeting them where they are, and our expectations can really get in the way when those expectations are not giving the child the opportunity to be able to demonstrate. And so and work with us. And so I agree with what Becky said.
And I think that I'm actually going to skip ahead to a different question, but this one's really for all of you to answer in different ways. I think mainly it's more in the virtual world, but I think it applies even some in person. A lot of questions have arisen about how we support diverse students in the virtual environment. You know, I've seen here in Clark as virtual classroom expectations are coming out. Sometimes there's ones that say, students are to sit in their chair at a desk with eye contact for the entire session, fully engaged, and it's a 30 to 45-minute session. And as a parent with kids who aren't, who would much rather be probably upside down in the chair half the time than sitting straight, you go, how is this going to work for my kid who has autism? How is this going to work for my kid who's not a typical learner, even though I kind of dislike that word typical, because I think kids just are, everybody's unique and everybody's different. So how, what is everyone's advice for how to make this work in a virtual environment, whether you're only doing it part-time or full-time, for kids who are challenged by the idea of trying to sit for 20, 30 minutes staring at a screen, when we know in a classroom, even some of them, their accommodations allow them to get up and walk around the room, because we know that sitting is probably not going to happen for them. So what would be your suggestions of how to make that work for kids who need a more flexible environment, and especially for general education teachers who maybe aren't automatically understanding how to adapt this to kids in their class who have IEPs or 504s or special needs?
I can start with that. With the lesson planning that we've done, especially for K through 5, we've done a lot of movement, show me, stand up, go run and get this, so that kids are not just sitting. Turn off your camera and go, and we did a unit on shadows. Go outside and find your shadow. Now come back and report about what you saw. So things like that. So kids aren't sitting. Singing for K through 2, singing things, getting up and doing motions for vocabulary, having everyone yell out the answer at the same time, using the chat feature on like a Google Meet, so that kids are not just sitting the whole time that they are engaging in the lesson, that they do have some other modalities besides just visually and and listening while they are learning.
Thank you. I think all of us adults have discovered what Zoom fatigue is. So we've all reached, and so I think it's a typical question, how is that going to work? So Lisa, maybe from a special education perspective, especially your special education elementary. And I think that's some of the parents who are going, how is this going to work?
Yes, they definitely need brain breaks with physical activity. My advice for families is to set up your students' learning environment as best you can. Do what's best for your child and your family. Don't sweat the small stuff. I know your child's education is super, super important, but it's a pathway to get to it. I have students that like to lay underneath the table to do their activity, their assignment. Whatever works for your student, you have to do that. That's going to set your student up for success. Please communicate with your child's case manager to see how they can help you. If you need an item that's necessary, communicate that with them. There's a website called Donors Choose, and it's for teachers to create projects to obtain funding for certain items. I know several teachers that have their pages up because they service students that come from backgrounds that don't necessarily have a lot of supplies. They're already hearing from their parents of things they need. So please reach out to your case manager and share your needs with them.
Yeah, see, that seems to be a repeated theme, I think more so than ever. The partnership that's required between families and educators is just absolutely essential this year, and having that open line of communication so that kids get the best education that they can. Catherine, did you want to add anything? I think they covered a lot, but if you would like to add anything.
No, I really don't have a lot to add. Just a lot of adding humor, games, so social emotional learning is really, all across the state of Nevada, such an important component of education, but ensuring that it's embedded and directly taught in our lessons. And there's so many different ways we can do it, and just helping those kids and remembering that this is their opportunity to relate to one another. So building opportunities for them to engage in that relationship building, and opportunities for them to get those social emotional learning components and areas. I think that really can improve their confidence to try something, even if they make a mistake or something. Now, we're all on this screen, everyone can see everyone and they can see everything that happens. And so there's an element of vulnerability in that. It's a higher level of vulnerability when you're in a crowded room with lots of activities going on, with lots of kids focusing on lots of other things besides the screen. So I would embed social emotional learning whenever possible and directly teach it.
I think that's good advice. This next question is for you, Catherine, because I think sometimes, I know as a parent, until I really needed support from a school counselor, I didn't always understand the many hats that school counselors wear. And so I was hoping you could maybe share some of those things. And again, I know every district's different, every school is set up a little bit different, but maybe some of the core services and supports that school counselors offer as families are experiencing. We know that there's such a high rate of unemployment and there's so many different family situations happening right now. What types of things do school counselors help families with, and how can families access those supports?
So school counselors, and most of our districts also have school social workers or safe school professionals now, work as a team. Your school counselor or school social worker often can help families find resources and connect them to some of those basic needs. And I want to start with that because it's so foundational, and a lot of parents are looking for things like that. So they can help make referrals, they can provide support, they help with college and career connections and readiness, the social and emotional support, 504s, connections with case management, and how we often refer to school counselors as really a cross-functional role. School counselors help students who are English language learners, just about almost any program or special event or circumstance that's not directly supported 100% through curriculum instruction goes through the counselor in some capacity. So counselors are often connectors. They demonstrate the opportunities for those connections, and they give ideas about clubs, about activities that are happening on the campus. So I would encourage parents to make contact with the school counselor, look at the information that's available that the school counselor has, look at what their school social worker or safe school professional has, because our state of Nevada has funded them very generously through the Nevada Department of Education as well. And that combination of professionals do quite a bit to provide student support. They also help with crisis management, emergency response. People talk about grief and loss. So you were talking about graduation, loss attachments, attachments with the school environment, everything's being canceled. Sports and activities have been canceled. Local things that people look forward to have been canceled. Things have changed. So if you have a relative that has a baby, you can't go to the hospital and go see the baby the way that they used to. So counselors and social workers can be very helpful with all of those things. We have lots of ideas about that and about providing that support. So grief and loss and expectations. And I hope that wasn't too much, but yeah.
See, everybody has to be on mute at least once, and we'll see how many we can rack up tonight. No, I appreciated that answer, because again, counselors you guys wear so many hats, and it's kind of like the heartbeat of a school in a way, like trying to support all these different functions. And I'm always amazed at how many resources counselors seem to know about. If you go and say, hey, I know this, or this family needs that, and suddenly counselors have their magic hat of being able to figure out how to help and support. And for those of us who are going back to school all digital or all distance, counselors are still there. You just have to reach out in a different way. It's going to be through phone or through email, but they're still is assigned to the schools and meant to be supporting. So encourage families to recognize that resource is still available, and to take advantage of that resource. Also wanted to talk a little bit, well, actually a question came in on the feed that I don't know, Becky, if you know the answer to this, because I'm not sure I've seen it published, at least for CCSD. I don't know if you know the answer, Catherine, but there's questions about kids getting tested for Gait, both students who missed it last spring because of the building closures, and then also kind of how that whole process will work. So I don't know if you know any answers about that.
So I do know that they are going to be tested, the kids. I mean, we stopped, I had 47 kids on my caseload to test. I tested 10. All the paperwork we had to, at the end of last year, we had to put in all the paperwork for the referrals for second grade for those kids. And the Gait teachers will be testing them. And there is, we're using in Clark County, the Clever app that houses all the passwords for the kids, and it has all the apps that Clark County has approved, and the testing websites are on there for the gifted teachers to test the students. So they will be tested. If they had a referral last year, the parents aren't too worried that those teachers will, the Gait teachers will be testing kids virtually.
Very cool. I don't know if there's any changes in Washoe. I don't know how you guys do testing up there for the process.
So we're very similar. So
okay.
We have our director used to work in Clark County, Cheryl D. Martino. So we're very similar in that. And so I haven't heard much differently than that. What is a challenge though is related to some of the requirements for school psychologists to test. So as we're looking at reevaluations and initial evaluations, looking at things like students who may need special education services, that has been a challenge. So we have to work out creative ways to have some face-to-face opportunities and be mindful of some of the rules virtually. So I have seen a lot of people just, we're engaging in a lot of conversations about how school psychologists can complete what they need to do in a different way, or with some modifications and attention to the virtual environment. So that I have seen has changed and been a bigger challenge for us in Washoe.
Yeah, I think I know many families, and I don't know, that was kind of directed at Gait, but and you brought in special education IEPs, and I think that's true. I don't know, Lisa, I've heard from families similar questions about special education, trying to get the rest of the testing completed or assessments that need to be done. And I think there is a lot of discussion regarding how is this going to happen, what can happen, what opportunities are there.
Can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
So at the end of last year too, with the paperwork, the Gait department, CCSD, there's assessment logs, and the assessment logs log in who you've tested if they've qualified, and we had to fill out the assessment logs for all the students who had not been tested. So those are on a legal document with the Gait office that will go to all the Gait specialists at the beginning of the year. So any student that was identified to be tested has been already put into this log, so that the record is there. If parents do have confusion, or if they have questions too, they can reach out to the Gait teachers at their school because they will know who's on those logs.
Yeah. Thank you. So one of the questions that came up that was submitted by a parent was about helping support twice exceptional students. I was getting ready to put the question into the list and then realized we probably should start by explaining what twice exceptional students are. So I think, Becky, I'll have you explain that, and then probably Becky and Lisa can answer parts of the question that was submitted.
So a twice exceptional student is a student who is qualified for both gifted services and also has an IEP for another disability or special need. To me, twice exceptional students are just like any other gifted student or any other student. They're unique. They will have different needs within the classroom, but that's how any teacher, especially a teacher that's working with a special needs population, is going to look at and view any student that they're working with. So to me, my twice exceptional students, and I had quite a few, I guess I made accommodations based off of any student in my classroom. So it wasn't any different what I would do with a student who was twice exceptional as any other student in my class, because I felt like they all had special needs. Any student does.
Yeah. So that is, the question. There are a lot of kids who have an IEP or a 504 that are also gifted. And so there's this, there's parents who are wondering, how do I ensure both sides or all the different needs my child has get met? And Lisa, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about how those special education, how it's looked at to ensure special education students' needs get met, even if our classroom system kind of changes.
Before Lisa answers too, I want to explain one more thing. We had gifted students that couldn't read, and they were gifted and highly gifted. And I know a lot of people looking, couldn't understand that. Well, they're testing the lowest in the school on this test and this test. That doesn't mean that they can't think. And so we need to remember that gifted students, that it's about thinking and how they're thinking and how they're putting things together, and they have complex brains. And, sometimes those other skills aren't there. And I had students going to resource and then coming to Gait. So it's looking at that too, that again, gifted students are outside the box. It's not always straight A students that we're getting in the top testers.
Basically, I agree with what Becky said as far as I look at twice exceptional students as any other student that has an IEP, because it's my responsibility to find out the missing puzzle, what that student needs. And like Catherine said, giving them, meeting them at what point they're at, and pushing them slightly with love to get to meet those goals and benchmarks. I actually have 3 twice exceptional students on my caseload this year, and I've asked that same question myself. How am I going to meet the needs of these students when they're responsible for being in their general education classroom live sessions, as well as my live sessions, as far as their goals and benchmarks for their IEP. So it's a learning adventure for me. I believe there's times I think outside of the box, and that's how we have to do it. These students are just like any other student. They need certain things, and we need to figure out what those things are and meet them where they're at.
Thank you.
And what a great thing for those students being able to go to Gait, because with Gait, you're looking at a progress report on thinking skills. And so they're not getting letter grades within Gait. So the kids can come in and learn and not be scared to participate or make mistakes, because there's a lot of conversation and a lot of projects, and the projects are based off of individual goals and rubrics that kids create within the gifted program. So a lot of times when you are twice exceptional, these kids come in and flourish in the gifted setting because they're not these parameters of what's my grade going to be, and they're allowed to think and speak. And again, I mean, these kids are excellent, complex thinkers. So now you get to hear their voice because they're not scared they're going to make a mistake, or that they have to write a 5-paragraph essay and they can't, spell words. It's a very different and safe environment in a gifted setting and a resource setting, because you're meeting individual needs based off of their goals.
This kind of switching lanes a little bit, but it's kind of funny to bring in, but this topic of kind of seniors, but it seems to be when we talk about back to school and all the different needs of students, we hear a lot from these different types of learners. And then there's also a lot of senior parents that obviously, Becky and Lisa had seniors who graduated this year. So you experienced the challenge of spring personally as parents. But, there's a lot of, Catherine, this is probably best for you, as students go into their senior year or even junior year, there's so many things that they're preparing for college or career. And, you were kind of talking about grief. I think there's a lot of that going on in this process of like, how is it going to look different? What's going to happen? What's not? And then also, how do all of those kind of steps to prepare for their next stage, whether it's an apprenticeship or college and testing, like how, what systems and supports are getting put into place for those kids? And then also, how do parents help their student navigate that when sometimes, and I get it, you're 17 and all of a sudden things you've looked forward to for years might not happen. So what's your advice for that kind of big group of seniors who are entering a very odd senior year?
So I can imagine that Lisa and Becky can add a lot to this, but first of all, you mentioned the grief and loss. So, identifying and accepting that. And then really what it's about is hope. So our kids in a lot of ways are what we're looking at for hope, as we're facing a future, they're that piece for us. So demonstrating to them that there are all these people at colleges and universities who can't wait to talk to them, who have lots of things to tell them, who are constantly, I have talked to people who are putting things online for students. There are career and technical education programs and services, opportunities to do internships and connect to jobs and to volunteer for groups. All with a future focus, all with an emphasis on, here we are, you are our youth, you are incredible, amazing people that we are all watching and we want to support. And when I talk to people at colleges and universities, and when I talk to people in our career and technical and in our workforce who are looking at kids and ready to accept them, they often say, I hope they know we still want them. We still want to talk to them. I hope they reach out to us, and I hope they don't give up. And so as a parent, what I would most strongly encourage you to do is help your child to recognize that all of these people that are out there are still looking at them to take the helm and to take advantage of what those opportunities are. And they often spend hours and hours in meetings talking about ways that they can engage and include them. We had a lot of seniors last year in the class of 2020 who ended up saying, I think I liked this way that my school put together this graduation better than the old way. I don't want to go to a big event center and hear my name mentioned just for a minute and walk by and wait hours and hours. I loved this other way better. And so, a lot of that was what the school did and what the parents did and what the community did to rally around the kids. And it's that rallying around our youth and for them recognizing that we are emphasizing on them and the role that they play in all of our recovery and in their own recovery is so essential. So, I imagine that we will be incorporating into graduation for the class of 2021, some of the lessons we learned with the class of 2020, whether our year is closed half year or open all year, or no matter what that looks like. So as a parent, I would just model that even in the midst of some of the most difficult and uncertain times, and we all have our own issues around what's uncertain and what isn't, that element of hope and future focus, because our kids are looking for that, just like we had that great anticipation and expectation way back when. So let's help them keep that as an area to emphasize.
Good advice.
I agree with Catherine too, and I think that the schools, with all the little ceremonies they did and the parades, that was a really special thing for the kids. It was the first time it happened, and the signs that showed up in the yard in the middle of the night. I think all those things, but also celebrating as a family events. I saw people putting on their own proms in their houses and doing things like that, and I think that made it, we tried to make it more of a special thing, that this had never happened, and they were the first one paving the way for these new traditions and celebrations. But I think families should still celebrate those milestones for these kids, because they're such a big deal to the kids.
Yeah. Lisa, did you want to add anything?
Just that I know for my daughter, she did experience the loss. It was very emotional in our household about that time. And I knew that I had to be there for her, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, to get her over that hump. And now next week she'll be starting UNLV, and she has some new fears and anxieties about that. So it's all part of life, and we will all get through this.
Yeah. And actually that leads perfectly in the next question, which is one of the questions that I've heard a lot is from families who are in transition steps. So they have a kid going from 5th to 6th, they have a kid going from 8th to 9th. And so it's all of a sudden, not only are we going back to school and it looks different, we're going back to school and it's a whole new level for kids that maybe they missed the traditional open houses or events that happened with that. So Catherine, what suggestions would you have for parents who have kids in those transitions of how to help them bridge that gap as they move up?
A couple things. First of all, I would encourage them, if they want to reach backwards. So, you know, some people, you know, the issue is I didn't really get to say goodbye. I didn't really get to go. And, you know, we can't go visit all of our other teachers, but tell them it's okay for you to write a letter to your teacher, or write an email to your past teacher, or say something to the principal that's a goodbye. So I would encourage them to engage in, you know, as Becky mentioned and Lisa mentioned, those rituals around grieving the fact that they didn't get to transition. And then I would look to the new school. So a lot of schools are putting things together. They have virtual tours, they have things that are available, they're doing open houses. Go to the school and visit the school and look at it, even if you're on distance ed, because it helps build that connection. And if they haven't been there before because they don't have siblings, have them look at that and go through that, establish that routine. So lots of people have talked about the routine. Have them practice, you know, that ritual of when we're going to have school and what that structure is going to look like for school. And look at what that is, and then build those relationships. So a lot of schools have things that they're putting into place virtually that were in place before. So they have clubs, or they have things that they can join. There are community agencies and organizations that are working on youth engagement and collaboration opportunities too. So take advantage of those. You know, as a group, they can start something with a close group of their friends that help connect them to the school. So I would encourage them to do some of those things, especially in the absence of some of the traditional activities that they had before. So, you know, spend some time on the school's website, look at what they have, connect with the staff, you know, really demonstrate that relevancy that they have as a new up and coming student, because they have that, and there's going to be activities taking place to help them connect.
Awesome. And we are like already out of time, which is crazy. But you guys have given such good information and I appreciate you joining us. I wanted to kind of end on a question that is a big question, and I don't expect everybody to answer this fully in 2 minutes. So recognize that it's short on time, but you know, we've talked about a lot of things that relate to communication and support and engagement. But this is where parents feel comfortable maybe doing that. But we also know that Nevada is a really diverse state. We have a lot of families right now experiencing job loss and house transitions. We have immigrant families who don't speak the language and aren't familiar with the education system that existed a year ago, let alone trying to navigate Chromebooks and Canvas and blended learning and all these other things right now. We have grandparents that are raising their grandkids, and school looks totally different than it did 40, 50 years ago. How do you think we can be mindful as both parents who maybe are engaged and also educators as a school system in supporting families that don't look traditional, that families that have complex needs, families that are struggling to figure out how to meet basic needs, let alone how to help their kid do math? How do we bridge that gap so that all kids get what they need, even if their home life presents different challenges or obstacles that maybe another family doesn't have? I told you a really big question. Everybody can answer however you'd like, and you can take it from your own perspective.
I'll start. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and I know Catherine and Becky both have said this as well. It starts with the relationship that you have with your students, educators, and IEP team or Gait teacher, and general education teacher. There's got to be a point where you feel comfortable enough to share your needs with somebody. And if your needs fall on deaf ears, go to the next person. Be adamant that you're advocating for your student. Whatever you need, we should be able to help accommodate that. That's our job. That's our whole goal, is to help not only the student, but the whole family. I know the counselors at some of the schools that I've served have a plethora of resources as far as, the home, food, rent, assistance. There's all kinds of resources. I have some of those as well. One website I did want to mention for parents is understood.org.
Yes.
It's a place all about special education student needs. It includes a ton of resources about anxiety, depression. You can learn about your student's disability there. Kids' mental health. I just read an article on that website today about how to help in this day and age of kids going back to virtual learning or going back to school in a virtual learning environment. There's going to be a lot of changes. There already has been, and we need to make sure that our students' mental health is in check. And if you feel that your student needs a little bit more support in that area, I'm sure that the school psychologist has some resources as well as the counselor. But it's up to you to make that initial reaching out to let us know exactly what you need. We're there to help.
I'll be really
Thank you,
short
Lisa.
with my answer. I think the general education teachers are the ones who are the experts in knowing which students are the ones that have the most need. And I think that as a team, then you start with those teachers who know their students and are getting to know their students, and move through the forces within the building, because I think as a collaborative force, with all the experts within the building, that students' needs can be met. Maybe very in different ways than we've seen before, but they can be met. We're all being very creative now and collaborative.
Well, and I think the heart of educators is always trying to figure out how to help their students. That's the universal thread that you see again and again, no matter what grade is taught. It's all about how do we serve kids. Catherine, any final thought on that question?
Yes, so I definitely would agree that it's there's parents helping parents and teachers and staff members reaching out and supporting. But I also, I would point to some great resources that we have that everyone has available, like our Nevada 211, Crisis Support Services of Nevada. I think there are a lot of parents who don't know what's on those sites and what types of resources. And I think that sometimes in the past, there's been, people have felt stigma around seeking out resources and services. And I would encourage them to know that that you are respected, that we do want to help provide support, that we know that there are students who need more, and it is our responsibility to work with all of you to really meet everyone and help everyone get the most out of their academic school year. So I would just encourage parents to know that those resources are available in the state of Nevada for everyone. If you're a teacher, if you're a business owner, no matter where you are, that we have some great community resources, that our community is in tune and aligned with our schools. And a lot of what we do, whether we're using mobile crisis services for, or something for, suicide or any type of things, substance use, which has increased a lot during the pandemic, that we're all in this together. And so just know that, going in and use those resources.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Becky, Catherine, Lisa, and sharing your insights as educators, counselors, professionals intended to serve our students. I do, this year looks different. I don't know how it'll go. I'm on that journey like everybody else as a parent, trying to figure out how this is going to work. But I also am hopeful that, I think it was Catherine, you talked about the resilience, and that is something that I believe strongly, that kids always amaze me. My kids always amaze me, and I think there's and the creativity that comes out of crisis, even though it is hard and there are many challenges, there are also some wonderful things happening, and educators just stepping up in tremendous ways all across our state. So thank you for taking the time to join with us tonight. Thank you for those of you who tuned in, and to everyone preparing for this back to school year. Let's talk to each other, let's support each other, and we'll make it through, right? And it'll be one of those things that we tell everybody about in 10 years. We just won't say the word 2020, right? That'll be like the year we all want. But thank you again, and have a great night.